spoon bending, astral projection, telekinesis, remote viewing. All of these things are great party tricks, but do they have any real potential to solve the problems in our daily lives? It turns out the U.S. government thinks so. They have partnered with the Monroe Institute at various times throughout recent history to train soldiers for skills the rest of us might consider science fiction. So are these skills accessible to regular people, and what is the Monroe Institute? My next guest is a mechanical engineer who worked for the Ford Motor Company and was looking for a way to be more efficient. This was the unlikely launching point down a path that led him to become the interim executive director of the Monroe Institute. He's now the president of Technology Accelerated Consciousness Exploration. And today he's going to help us weave together the pragmatic and esoteric as we explore the question, are there practical reasons to go beyond the five senses? Exploring consciousness and encouraging curiosity, the highly inquisitive and decidedly practical Stephen Ng Qui Sang. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Meredith. Looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. You are very well versed in the history of the Monroe Institute. And I think listeners will find, if they end up doing kind of like a deep dive on their own, that they'll find that Bob Monroe was a pragmatic man who a lot of people would consider having paranormal, supernatural experiences, and was so successful at teaching others in that area that the U.S. Army dropped off a busload of soldiers for training. So can you tell us a little bit about the history of the Monroe Institute's relationship with the U.S. government?
Sure, but maybe a little bit about Bob just to give that foundation. So Bob Monroe was a businessman that started out in New York. He had radio shows, he got into cable TV. So a very successful businessman, not a spiritual person at all. And then one day he had an out-of-body experience, and that totally changed his life. And because he had the resources, he decided to investigate what this OBE experience was. And coming from a radio background, he had a lot of knowledge about audio technologies. So he developed an audio technology called Hemisync that helped him to have these out-of-body experiences and then ultimately to teach it to others. So he became an expert in the field. He actually wrote 3 books as well, and I think that's probably how the government heard about Bob Monroe. And eventually they sent someone to go investigate the Monroe Institute. So here's this place in Virginia, in the Blue Hills of Virginia, and they said, let's go see what this guy's doing out there. It sounded rather interesting. So yeah, they had a CIA agent that went there. He attended a gateway course just like anyone else can. And during that course, he just had some really wonderful experiences that changed his life and changed how he perceived reality. And he documented this in a wonderful report that ultimately came out a couple of years ago on TikTok that really brought a lot of interest to the Monroe Institute. So that's kind of a quick story of how this all happened.
That is interesting. And so the progression of partnership between the U.S. government and the Monroe Institute, when did it start, and is it still ongoing?
So we don't have any formal relationship with the government, as I know at this point, but we've had folks come in and out with that experience. We've even had people like Joe McMoneagle, who was actually sent to the Monroe Institute many, many years ago to learn more about being a remote viewer. And he started the whole Stargate program many years ago. He was actually trained by Bob Monroe as part of a contract with the U.S. government. And Joe McMoneagle went on to be probably one of the best remote viewers out there. And he worked for the government to basically get information for the U.S. government that it couldn't get in any other way. And now he's trains at the Monroe Institute. He's a big part of the Monroe Institute and a wonderful guy.
I'm imagining the listener who doesn't really believe in any of this to hear you in such like a matter-of-fact way go, so if you're interested in remote viewing, you should look this guy up. There are many, many rabbit trails that one could go on from this episode, I'm sure. But I wanted to ask you about the research side of it, because the Monroe Institute has been around for so long, and you know, they have essentially a controlled environment. They've got students who come in. Some of them are even, you know, technically property of the U.S. government, right? The Army soldiers and so on. Is there records of research? Like, how do they compile and conduct these sorts of, for lack of a better word, experiments?
We've got a dedicated research director that's doing research as we speak. And this has been going on for decades now, because Bob really had a passion for trying to understand what this was about. And he purposely brought in psychologists, researchers from around the world to try and understand this experience and put some more science behind it. I would recommend folks to go to the Monroe Institute website, and you can find a lot of links to the research papers that have been done over the years. But yeah, we continue to look at the effects of the sound technology that we have and how that affects people. And really, our focus is more about how this helps people in their lives. In fact, the stuff that I like, because I have a technical background, is looking at how it affects our brainwaves. And I've been able to look at a lot of data that we've had. I've been able to work directly, especially when I was the executive director, to look at the research and see the data that's coming out. And it's fascinating to see how a certain pattern of sound is able to influence our brainwaves, and then we can link these brainwaves to certain states of mind. So, for example, in a sleep state, we would normally see dominant brainwaves around the 0 to 4 hertz, and you'll see that person get into a deep sleep, relaxed state. Or in this awake state with us talking right now, that's what we call the beta waves. So, using the sound technology that we have, we gently support you into these certain brainwave states, and that leads to these experiences. I've researched a lot of different things in my life, and I just found that this technology worked very well for me and assists me in my spiritual growth as well. So, being a technology guy, this is kind of what grabs me and what I love to explore. Because I look at it as bringing technology, bringing science to our spiritual exploration. I have right here in my office a sleeping mattress. I put on the headphones, I set my intention, I listen to the Hemisync or the Monroe Sound Science, and that leads me into the states that I want. So there's nothing fancy about it except to go into it and have the support of the sound technology into your experience.
For you, what's the reason that you have this as like a daily practice? Like, what does it do for you that without it you wouldn't have?
What drives me is an incurable curiosity. I think it's why I became an engineer. I just love to know how things work. I became a mechanical engineer because I understood the physical world. I've studied business. I have an MBA's way, so I can understand the business world. And then I found there were questions I started to have in my mind that were beyond the physical world. Why are we here? How does this work? What is the purpose of life? I just got to a place where I had these bigger questions and nothing else could address it except going down a spiritual path. So I found that going into meditation, supported with the technology that we have, got me those answers. I mean, I got to places where there was these deep, profound learning that I got no other way. And what I love about it is this is not something that I'm reading in a book. It's something where I've gone into my own meditation and I'm getting answers from guides. I'm getting answers from source. I am being taken to places where I actually experience what I'm looking to understand. Ultimately, the idea is that these tools are kind of like training wheels. So you can definitely do it on your own. And there are ways that I have, techniques that I teach as well, that allow you to get into these states very quickly. But it's just so much more comfortable and familiar using the sound technology.
Can I ask, what are the questions that you're looking to have answered? And I ask that with respect, of course, but I'm asking that also from the perspective of the average non-spiritual, never meditated a day in their lives person who may, like you, also come from that more pragmatic habit of thinking as an engineer or someone just kind of in that realm, going, well, what answers do I need? I'm good.
Well, a very fundamental question that people ask, and one of the earlier ones that I ask is this it? Is this life the only life? Do I exist beyond this reality? What else is out there? Like, do we have one shot at it and that's it? So, I went out to understand the out of body experience because if I could achieve the out of body experience, I would be proving that my consciousness exists beyond this reality. So back in 1999, I was experimenting with the Gateway series. So this is used to be a set of CDs, which teach you how to do these meditations. So I did that for a full year, and eventually I achieved an out-of-body experience. And in that experience, it was real. I knew I existed out of my body. And that just opened me up to the possibility that, hey, I really exist. And then I continued along that journey and I started to experience my past lives and seeing how I lived in other lives. And it's very, very real. I mean, viscerally, I was there. I was communicating with others. I saw the children that I had in the previous life. And this will sound weird, but I even experienced some of the lives that I had where I was not a human being. I was some other creature. And that's quite mind bending. But once you start
Wow, it
doing
is.
that, you begin to realize, wait a minute, like now for me, I know I exist beyond this reality without a shadow of a doubt.
Mhm.
And that has eliminated the whole fear of dying. You know, I've even gone out and helped folks cross over. Like recently, one of my aunts passed away, and she was a very religious person. And I knew that she needed support to pass over. And I went and I helped her do that. And when you have those experiences, you come back and go, yeah, this is real. You know, all the stuff that Bob said in his books, we exist beyond the physical reality. We are non-physical being having a physical experience. All these things I now have come to a place where I know it's true for me. And so that brings peace to my life. It brings understanding to my life. And it's answering the deep questions that have been plaguing me for so long. So I find doing these meditations gets me the answers that I'm looking for.
How do you shut off the part of your brain that is an engineer during this process? Because it's analytical, it's question asking, it's categorizing, it's note taking and descriptive. And in my mind, I know left brain, right brain has been debunked or whatever, but for simplicity's sake, let's just go with that. So
Right.
the side of your brain that is more fluid, nonlinear, creative, it's quite opposite from the side of the brain that it takes notes and uses Excel spreadsheets and makes formulas and figures out how gears work. Do you have to like totally switch over to the other part of you that is lets go of all of that analyzing in order to have these experiences?
Actually, I look at it as using both. That's what I have grown. When I came into this, I was very much left brain, very much logical. And I learned to explore my heart. And I know that sounds weird, but there is a whole intelligence to our heart. And I view the heart as that source or the way you tap into love. And so as I went deeper into meditations, I discovered, hey, I've got a heart and there is love there and there's wisdom that comes with experiencing that love. And so when I go into these meditations, I bring both. I bring that heart, the connection to love, to our source, and then I bring the analytics to take the information, the experiences that I've had, and bring those out so I can remember them, so I can document them, and so I can learn from them. Because there's a lot of times I go into these meditations and I get information that I don't quite get, I don't understand, but a year later it makes sense. So one of the things I really emphasize when I teach is to document the information you're getting, because that's your way to understand it as you go along.
So, why the Monroe Institute for you? Of all of the ways that you could potentially approach this exploring consciousness, why the Institute?
So I have tried many different things. And as I said, ultimately, when I actually tried the sound technology for myself, I found that it worked. And that was still not enough. I've gone into Asia backpacking and meditating in temples around the world, just trying to out different things. But I keep coming back to the Monroe because we're here to give you a set of tools, a set of process, a wonderful environment to support you in the process. But the whole idea is focused around go find your own answers. But here's the tools to help you get there. Where in a lot of other places that I've meditated and you go with a shaman, you go with a Tibetan master, and they're very much about this is the answers, now sit down and meditate. I love to ask questions. And I found, I still remembered, we were meditating in Bodh Gaya, and the teacher more or less got annoyed with me because I kept on asking questions. And I thought, this doesn't work for me. I need a place where I can ask questions. And I'm perfectly fine with a teacher saying, no, I don't know the answer to that. But what we do with Monroe is really say, go find out for yourself. And we'll support you in doing that. And that's the way, too, I found that the answers I get are one now I know, versus when you get an answer from a teacher, at most what you're getting is a belief. And you're getting the experience of that person. And I think ultimately we're here to get our own experiences, and that's how we grow from our own experiences. So really, I view my role now as hopefully inspiring folks to go out and try these things. And I love to share my stories with them and get them excited so they can go and experience that for themselves. And then they'll get their own answers. And that's what will help them to grow. Because I think ultimately we're all here to grow, to experience, to become the more perfect us that we are meant to be.
Well, that kind of leads me to the topic of cults, because a lot of folks who seek this sort of outside of the box experience, they're struggling in some area. They don't
Right.
usually have that pure and strong curiosity driving them to do something in addition to their 40-hour work week. You know what I mean? They usually have a need or a vulnerability. How would you recommend people explore this area of our reality without falling victim to cult situations?
Ultimately, you've got to learn to know yourself and know your gut. And that's what's gotten me out of trouble when I get into a certain area and I put it out there and I say, is this real? Are they coming from a loving place? And my gut comes back and says, no. I say, okay, I'm going to step away. But ultimately, you do have to go out and try things. But I do look at where the teachings are not really based in religion, where it's more about the process and not about following a guru. I've seen that happen, and I've ultimately come back and said, no, this isn't right, because it has to be about your own growth. And if you become a follower, all you're doing is really gaining the experience of another person and believing that experience. And I believe that truth to be found, and again, this is all my personal opinion, but it has to come from your own experience and your own growth and getting your own answers. And the most a teacher can do is guide you and inspire you, but ultimately you got to do the work yourself. So, I do encourage folks to try things. That's, again, how I got to the Monroe, and then sit back and say to myself, is this working or is it not? Because it's so easy to get caught up in the hype, but you got to decide and go inside and get to your gut and say, is this really working for me or not? And I've tried many different things, and I keep coming back to the Monroe Institute, to HemiSync, to the Monroe Sound Science that we have. And I found that works for me. And as long as that keeps working for me, I'm going to keep on using it.
Can you tell me more about how the HemiSync sound technology works, why it works?
Right. So the fundamental basis is something called binaural beats. And so what it means is we will play a signal in one ear, and then the signal in the other ear has a different frequency. So for example, let's assume we have a 100 hertz signal in the left ear, and then 104 hertz in the right ear. What the brain seems to do is generate a sound or a frequency that is the difference between the two. So that 4 hertz difference, the brain then seems to magnify that frequency. And then that seems to trigger the rest of the brain to get into a state that reflects that frequency. So for example, I said between 0.5 and 4 hertz is the state that we can map to that indicates you're in a deep REM sleep. So if I play a set of sound around 4 hertz, you'll start to see and feel physiologically your body falling asleep. So it's a gentle guide. And we like to use the term frequency following response, because we notice that if we keep giving you that frequency, then your brain seems to go into that mode, and then your body goes into that mode. And I want to emphasize this. It doesn't push you. Like if you're not into, let's say I don't want to fall asleep. I could play the HemiSync for as long as you want, and you still will not fall asleep. So it's more of a support. It's more of a gentle guide to get you there. And so I've tried meditating where you sit in front of a candle and just focus on that. And I do that for hours and hours. Or I play the HemiSync that I have for going into deep meditation, and I do it in 20 minutes. So that's the difference for me. And that's why I found that worked. So there are folks, in fact, we've had Buddhist monks come through the Monroe Institute, and they've said to us, I've been doing this for 20 years. And what you guys have here in half hour, it's amazing that you can get so deep so quickly. So that's what I love, is bringing technology now to spiritual pursuit. That's the way I look at it.
I really like the contrast of that. It's so interesting to me because it kind of makes you tilt your head and go, huh, because they seem so opposite of one another, at least on the surface. I wanted to ask you, since you do have experience being a trainer at the Monroe Institute, about some of the successes of your students. Can you think of any examples of students who had a very practical problem they were trying to overcome, whether they were at the Monroe Institute at the time or whether it was, after the fact that they had gone home, or they used the skills that they learned, astral projection, remote viewing, all the things that we kind of consider in the woo-woo bucket.
Right.
And one of those skills helped them in a very practical and measurable way that was outside of, the deeper life questions that you were sharing that it helped you with?
Yeah, so I teach as an outreach trainer, I teach weekend courses, and I'm constantly amazed how in a weekend people can have these wonderful insights. And so, for example, one of the recent courses I was teaching was a course about healing. And in the course of going through the exercises, this person got to a place of insight where basically they relived an issue in this reality, in this life, that was causing them a lot of physical pain. And they had never associated this particular experience with the pain that they were having. And as we talked about it in our debrief and we went through the experience that she was having, she began to realize, there's a link there. And so one of my guidance to her was to go into meditation and rethink of that experience and just to give herself a hug and just to say, I love you and I support you through this experience. And after she came out of this meditation where she had that as an intent, you could just see the wonderful relief and the let go of that stress, and some of the pain that she was having actually went away. And just in that weekend. And because a lot of pain can be linked to these emotional issues. And sometimes the emotional issues actually can come from a different life. And you bring it into this life and you have to let go of it too. And I personally have done that myself, where I've had to heal issues in other lives. So, going into meditation can be very practical in terms of healing yourself from these emotional issues. But I also like to use it for, I come from a corporate world as well. I still remember going into a meeting. It was a very contentious meeting. We were debating a technical issue, lots of strong opinions, lots of going at it. And I thought, wow, we are all separate. We're all in our different worlds. How do I help bring this together? And so I went into a quick little meditation, just kind of close my eyes for a little bit because that helps me to go inwards. And then I just created this energy connection around all of us in that meeting room. And the way I do it, I'm a very visual person, is I visualized almost like an energy ball, and it went around and connected all of us together. And I just set out the intent. Okay, let's all work towards a common good. Let's all connect to each other at a non-physical level. And I remember after I stopped and I did that, the temperature went down, the volume went down, and all of a sudden we're like, well, maybe we could figure this out together. And I actually didn't say anything. I just sat back in the meeting and watched the folks work together and form the answer. And that for me is, again, great proof about how we are connected both at a physical level and a non-physical level.
Can we send you to the United Nations? I mean, I feel like there are some greater applications waiting for you, sir.
Well, one of the things that really drives me, because I am a problem solver, and I got to a place in my life where I didn't have to focus so much on, getting the bills paid and so on. And I thought, how can I help the world? And what I realized after going into meditation and playing out different scenarios, maybe I could spend my time coming up with the best battery in the world. That will help, electrify the world. And I extrapolated to see what that would look like in the future. Anyway, after meditating for many, many days and keep coming back that those things didn't really help, it finally came back in my guidance that the best thing I could do in my own little way is help others to realize that we are truly all one. Because I've had that experience where I've gone into meditation and felt the connection to everything and the connection to each other. And when you get to knowing that, then you realize I have to live my life from that place of knowing we're all one. So in my own little way, in my own teaching here in Canada, my greatest hope is that I can help people meditate and get to a place of knowing we're all one. Because when you know that, you'll live your life from that place. And if we all live our life from that place, trust me, the world will be a better, much, much better place.
I'm starting to see how the practical and, I know you don't like the word woo-woo, but I'm really struggling to find a descriptive word that kind of encapsulates this whole other part of reality. So forgive me, but if it takes monks years and years and years to get to this place of feeling oneness, being able to put into a contentious meeting room a feeling of oneness. You're right. More people aren't going to do that because, we've got 40-hour plus work weeks, kids with extracurriculars, unused paid vacation in most cases. Like, we're not like, oh yeah, let me add this to my itinerary to meditate for long amounts of time every day. So if the sound technology can speed up the process with the same result and without any psychedelics.
Yep.
I mean, that is appealing to a lot of people because although, I mean, I'm pro psychedelic, but it freaks some people out. So to be able to on ramp into those benefits without the use of plant medicine and without the excessive amounts of time, I could really see how that would be like a practical answer to that.
Yeah, and in all honesty, I got to the Monroe Institute just from a practical purpose that I needed to learn more faster and more efficiently. And I found out about how sound technology can help your brain get into a state of great learning. So that's how I started. But then you begin to realize once you start opening that door and you start getting these answers, you get bigger and bigger questions. And so I completely understand the struggle of living day-to-day life. And I had a hectic corporate job. I supported computer systems for Ford Motor Company that were 24 by 7. So my phone was buzzing all the time. So that it is absolutely hard to do that. But we have some sound technology that, for example, will help me to sleep. Because again, with a high stress job, you got to have that basis. Otherwise, that wrecks the rest of your day. So I used to listen to Ng Sang that helped me to sleep really well. Then there's Ng Sang that can help you get into a state of high creativity. Well, that's a really valuable skill to have in your day-to-day job. So, for example, if I was going into a meeting that I needed that, I'd find a quiet place, just grab an empty meeting room, put on my headphones, just go into that creative state and just start visualizing the answers in my mind. And it's amazing when you then go into the meeting, all of a sudden the answers start flowing out of you. You don't have to do a lot for it. You just have to practice it. But when you start getting the results, you'll magically somehow find the time to make it happen. Certainly, though, I completely understand if you got kids and the noise. And for me, I have that ability to do that. So I spend that time just meditating as often as I can. But I'll also say there are times too when you need to take a break. Like there are days when I've gone so far, so deep that I have to integrate the experience back into my normal life. And I'm actually going through that right now, where for the last 2 months I haven't meditated at all. But I've been
For
out
two
into
months?
for 2 months. Yeah, I've gone out into the forest. I'm working on my property. I'm just doing really, really physical things because I feel the need to ground. Because it's almost like you grow and you stretch so far that you need to come back and go, okay, I'm still here on the planet Earth. I need to ground here. Because you can go really woo-woo if you want to use that term. And you need to ground sometimes. So for the last 2 months, I haven't meditated because I just needed to ground. And the analogy we like to use, it's as if you're in the swimming pool and you're trying to push off and get to the next level, but you're in the middle of the water. And if you're pushing against water, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you can go back to the side of the pool and push your legs against the wall of the pool, then you can take off. So there are times when you just need to ground and take a break. And I've coached many people that way, and they say, I keep trying. I'm going, well, that's the problem. You keep trying too hard. This is different. Like I'm a type A personality. I'm very task oriented. And I had to learn to let go of that because trying harder doesn't work with this. It's more about relaxing into it and learning to let go. So this has been good for me too personally, is because I've discovered more of myself and more of my abilities than just what I use as an engineer. Coming from the heart side of things, you can tap into a world of intuition that logic doesn't lead you to.
Have you ever stumbled across, as you called it, an ability that you found you were able to tap into that freaked you out?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Because this seems so unusual to me. I would think there has to be something that was at least startling.
Honestly, no. And it's because I feel like I've done this before.
Oh,
And
okay.
I've probably experienced it in a different life. And all I'm doing is remembering some of those elements. So, for example, I thought I might bring this up, but we learned to bend spoons. So
Right.
here's a spoon that I bent simply with my intent.
Really?
So, yeah, really. So, as an
Okay.
engineer, right, you think this is a
Uh-huh.
spoon, and the way you would bend it is you'd apply heat to it, and then the spoon would bend. But quite literally, through several meditations in a course that I took, we set the intent for the spoon to bend, and then, the head just falls over. It just gets really soft and bends by itself. And what I love is when I was learning how to do this, there was actually a scientist at our course researching this, and he showed us pictures. So when you apply heat and you use a thermal camera, you'll actually see the heat going from the outside of the metal inwards, and then it melts. But when we were doing it with our intent, with our mind, you actually saw heat come out from the center of the metal and go outwards, and then it bent. So yeah, we can do this. And I'm not the only one. There was lots of other folks in the class that did it. So nothing unique about me. We are far more amazing than we realize. And that's what's wonderful about going into meditations is you begin to realize and know how amazing you are. And we are capable of so much more than
Okay, I
we
got
do.
spoon questions. I got spoon questions.
Sure.
How long did it take to bend the spoon?
Well, so I took a week-long course, and I think it was about the Wednesday, so that's about 3-4 days into all the meditation. We got into a room, we were playing this rock and roll music, just kind of getting our energy levels higher, and we were working with each other as partners, and we're setting out the intent to bend. And meanwhile, behind all this, of course, there were several other meditations where we're building up our energy, we're practicing our intent, and then all of a sudden, the spoon just went boop, just like that.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. And there were folks too that, didn't believe any of this, but they were just kind of curious about, can I really bend the spoon? And yes, you can. But, that's really an analogy for your life, because if you can have that intent affect a physical object like a metal spoon, think about how you can set the intent for your life and create the life that you want. And this to me is one of my big passions right now, is just learning more how manifestation works and setting the intent and how does the universe come together to support what's happening. Because I've been able to now look back at certain things that happen in my life and have the perspective of being up high and watching how these events and the people around you come into place to make something happen. And when you can have that higher perspective and look at this, you go, this is so cool. There's an amazing plan that can be put together. So you become a lot more responsible for your thoughts. Because I used to think, I can think whatever I want, no big deal. Now I'm like, oh, damn, my thoughts can bend the spoon. I better be really careful about what I think. So I have learned, and I'm still working on it, I'm by no means an expert, just to be responsible for my thought and realize what I am saying to myself and how that creates my reality. It is so important what we say to ourselves because we are setting an intent to the universe, and it physically can have an effect because I am a creator of my reality, along with all of us. But we really do create our reality with our thoughts, and I've been able to prove that to myself many, many times.
that's really interesting. I've just kind of been observing how our conversation has swung from that more esoteric to the practical, back and forth, back and forth. And that really summarizes what you have going on. I think my listeners, I can just feel them like screaming at me to ask you this question. So it's a bit of a hard transition,
Sure.
but it goes back to the spoon bending. Do you have that on video?
I don't. But there are lots of YouTube videos of folks out there. People tell me I should do that. I need to get around to it.
You should do it.
I should, yeah. But no, and actually what I will do when I do that is I'm going to buy a thermal camera so I can prove to the engineer types like me going, prove that works. And, but no, I've done it. And like I said, other folks have too. So it is not that unusual.
I like what you said about how it demonstrated to you the power and impact of your words, because that was my other question. Like, that's really incredible. But what is that good for? Like, I don't think I've ever been wandering around my house going, gee, I got all these spoons that are straight. If only they were bent,
Right.
But I have felt oftentimes stuck in thought habits that I'd like to undo, as everyone does. And we think about, okay, how can we fix that? Go to therapy, maybe do some psychedelics, maybe try to upgrade who you spend the most time with, etc. But that's really interesting that it's within the brain waves, if you will. There's like a untapped treasure there of what you tell yourself and how it can create your reality.
Absolutely. And I think where meditation helps you is to get you into a place of being able to focus on your intent, Because I bet if you could have someone sit outside of your brain and listen to all the things you're saying to yourself, it's very, very noisy if you're like me. There's a lot of different
Yes.
things you're
Oh
saying,
my gosh.
right? You're saying, I want to go left, then I want to go right, I want to go up, and I want to go down.
And always a Disney song. There is always a Disney song playing. Why?
For me, it's the Beatles. There's always a Beatles song going on in my head. But yeah, so you learn through meditation to focus. And again, when you bend the spoon, you realize, okay, I set the intent, I sent it the energy, and it happened. Okay, I got to be really careful what I think. And then you start to become more reflective and say, what am I thinking? Did I say that I really wanted to go left, but maybe I really wanted to go right? And so you start to learn to say, well, hold on, if my thoughts create reality, then I need to be very consistent and focus on what my thought is. But the key also is to let go of it too. But also as you go down this road too, your friends will change. And that's what I've seen, is that I am encountering more and more people that are spiritual. Having said that too, it just reminded me of a memory where, I came from a very corporate world, and the spiritual side of me I really kept to myself for a long, long time. But I got to a point where it was so much a part of my life that I just started to blurt out these little comments. And, and I remember every now and then somebody would look at me a bit strange in a meeting, and I'd say, look, guys, let's just focus and we'll make it happen. We'll just set the intent. And somebody would look at me and go, what are you talking about, Stephen? And then gradually people would come to me after these little comments, these little discussions. And what I discovered where I was at Ford, there was a whole lot of people around me that were actually very spiritual people. We just didn't talk about it. So every time I went on these big meditation courses, I'd come back, there was a group of guys and girls on my team that would meet with me, and we would go and have lunch and we'd talk about it for 2 hours. And these were people I never thought of spiritual folks, but people can almost sense it, that you're this way, and the questions will come up. And so that happens to me more and more in my life. These are amazing spiritual folks that I'm attracted to, and they're attracted to me, and we learn from each other.
That's amazing. It feels like magic, but there's so much of our reality that is unseen. Microbes and little germs and all the things that we accept, and yet there's this other part of it that we immediately put into like a religion bucket. And so it's an interesting thought experiment to start to go down. If there is a listener that wants to begin to kind of explore this, maybe they do have specific problems that they would like to have solved or specific questions that they want answered. What would you recommend to that person who's never meditated a day in their life, but they would like to get started kind of exploring consciousness?
Right. Well, that's the perfect set of words. So, I mean, I would highly recommend, and I do this again because I'm passionate about trying to help folks achieve that state for themselves. But yeah, I've got a website, exploringconsciousness.ca. So if you go there, there's a couple of courses I teach. They're just on the weekend. But the goal of those courses is really to give you the tools so that you can find out for yourself. The other thing I'd recommend too, you can go to the Monroe Institute website. There is a link there for community groups. And what it is groups in your local area that folks have formed. They're free. You come together, you share a meditation together, and it's a great way to try it out in a very friendly and supportive environment. So I do this here in Canada as well. We meet once a month and we try out different sessions. And it's amazing that about half the class are brand new people and the other half are folks that have been meditating for many, many years. And we're all just supporting each other. But it's just wonderful to see brand new people just try it and have an amazing experience in 45 minutes. And then they go, okay, this is real. And they pull on that string and, okay, I'm going to take a course now so I can go deeper. And away you go. The other thing I'd highly recommend, because that's the path I took as well, is reading Bob's books. So he wrote 3 books, Journeys Out of Body, Far Journeys, and Ultimate Journeys. What I love about it, he writes in a very pragmatic, very clear way. There's no religious connotation to it. And as an engineer, that's what attracted me to it.
And the sound technology, is that available for people to get somehow so that they can accelerate their own progress?
Absolutely. So Monroe Institute has a sound technology they call the Monroe Sound Science, which is the rebranding that I did when I was there. And then the HemiSync is also another organization. Bob owned both of them at one point, but they're now 2 separate organizations. But we work together cooperatively. So you can go to the HemiSync website, and both Monroe Institute and HemiSync have apps that you can try out the technology. And the best way is just to try it and see if that works for you.
Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. This has been such an interesting conversation. I know my listeners will really enjoy you and this topic.
Well, it's been fun, and I love talking with you.